Former U.S. President Donald Trump declaring a complete and total ceasefire between Israel and Iran.
Yeah, effectively ending what he actually dubbed the 12-day war.
Exactly. It was, well, quite the declaration, wasn't it? Sent shockwaves globally.
It really did, especially after such an incredibly swift, intense period of escalation. So our mission for you today
Yeah.
is really to try and cut through some of that noise.
Right.
We want to examine the timeline, what actually happened when, and highlight the key information, but also, the contrasting perspectives, because there were definitely conflicting stories emerging.
Oh, absolutely. Around this, like you said, rapid-fire conflict and then this sudden declared resolution, we'll dig into the immediate impacts and, frankly, the pretty unusual way this ceasefire apparently came about. And just so you know where we're getting this from, for this deep dive, we've looked at a whole range of sources. We're talking official government statements, reports from major news agencies, even posts on social media,
Yeah.
trying to get that multifaceted view.
Which you really need for something moving this fast.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's jump into it. This 12-day war, as Trump called it, where did it kick off?
Well, the sources seem to point squarely at June 22nd. That's when the U.S. launched what they termed Operation Midnight Hammer.
Right, Midnight Hammer. And this wasn't minor. We're talking strikes aimed directly at key Iranian nuclear facilities.
Yeah, Fordo, Natanz, Isfahan, pretty significant sites.
Definitely. And the stated purpose, according to the U.S. sources, was quite clear: to seriously damage Tehran's uranium enrichment capability. They used stealth bombers, precision munitions.
So a pretty deliberate and, well, forceful move. Was the thinking, based on the sources, more about sending a message, or was it a genuine attempt to, cripple their program significantly?
Well, the stated purpose was significant damage.
Right.
Whether that was the only goal, harder to say. But as you'd absolutely expect, Iran's reaction was immediate.
Mm-hmm.
Their chief of staff, Major General Abdolrahim Musavi, came out strongly. He condemned the strikes, called them, a violation of sovereignty, international law, the usual condemnations.
But crucially, he also pledged that it wouldn't go unanswered.
Exactly, setting the stage for, well, what happened next? Very quickly.
And it really didn't take long. Just the next day, June 23rd, Iran launched its retaliation. These were missile attacks targeting U.S. military bases across the Middle East.
And they even gave the operation a name, didn't they? Annunciation of Victory.
They did. Annunciation of Victory. It sounds quite potent.
It does. And what's really striking here, I think, is not just the speed, but also the targeting. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, specifically.
Yeah, that's a huge deal. It's the largest U.S. base in the entire region, right? Houses something like, 13,000 troops?
Around that number, yeah. But here's a really crucial detail from the sources. The base had apparently been recently evacuated.
Okay, evacuated before the strike.
That's what was reported, which, immediately makes you wonder about intelligence, doesn't it? Did someone know something was coming?
Interesting point. And it wasn't just Qatar, was it?
No, the Ain al-Saad base in western Iraq, also housing U.S. troops, that was hit too.
And we saw reports, even videos apparently, coming out of Doha, flares in the sky, loud booms. Sounds like missile defense systems kicking in.
Exactly. You had visual, auditory evidence of interceptions happening over the Qatari capital. It must have been quite tense on the ground.
I can only imagine.
And then Iran's IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, they officially confirmed it. They put out a statement saying, essentially, Iran won't let any aggression go unanswered. Sovereignty, territorial integrity, all that.
Did they say anything about where the missiles landed? Because targeting a base near a major city...
They did address that, actually. They claimed the missiles targeted areas outside populated zones, which, again, maybe suggests some careful calculation, trying to hit the base but avoid civilian casualties.
Perhaps. And the reaction elsewhere was immediate, too. High alert at the U.S. base in Syria, Khosrak. Air raid alerts popping up in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain.
The whole region just lit up instantly. Shows how interconnected everything is. One move here triggers alerts hundreds of miles away.
Absolutely. Then, later that same day, June 23rd, things took another turn. This time, Israel reportedly got involved.
Right. This came via social media, actually. The Israeli military reportedly posted an urgent warning on X, telling residents in a specific district of Tehran, District 7, to evacuate immediately.
Why? What reason did they give?
They cited ongoing strikes targeting Iran's military infrastructure.
Okay, so Israel's saying they were actively striking inside Tehran.
That's what the warning implied. And then, sure enough, reports started coming out of Tehran in the early hours of June 24th. Multiple loud explosions heard across the city.
In Iranian media, what did they say?
They reported air defense systems were active, engaging hostile aircraft, which they attributed to Israel.
Wow. Okay, so just to recap, U.S. strikes on Iran, Iran retaliates against U.S. bases, then Israel reportedly strikes inside Tehran, all within about 48 hours. That's intense escalation.
Extremely intense, which makes what happened next even more surprising.
The ceasefire.
The ceasefire,
Yeah.
out of seemingly nowhere, right?
Well, not nowhere exactly. It came via Truth Social. Donald Trump posting that there was a complete and total ceasefire, just like that.
Declaring the 12-day war over. He even laid out a timeline. Ceasefire starts in about 6 hours, Iran goes first, Israel follows 12 hours later, and then boom, 24 hours total, war's over.
He congratulated both sides, too, emphasized peace, respect.
Yeah, and finished with that line. The official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. Very definitive.
Very definitive.
Right.
But as is often the case in these situations, the reality behind the declaration seems, well, messier, more complicated.
Well, absolutely. When you start digging into the conflicting accounts, especially around how the ceasefire happened and the actual impact of the strikes, the picture gets quite murky.
So let's talk about that back-channel diplomacy. How did this ceasefire actually come together, according to the sources?
Well, reports indicate Qatar played a key role as a mediator. A senior Iranian official apparently confirmed Tehran accepted a ceasefire proposal,
Proposed by who?
reportedly put forward by the U.S., but mediated by Qatar. There were details from someone briefed on the talks suggesting Trump and J.D. Vance discussed it with Qatari officials,
Okay.
and then Trump apparently told Qatar that Israel was on board and asked Doha to basically help get Iran to agree.
So a classic diplomatic hustle behind the scenes. Very fast, though.
Extremely fast,
Yeah.
but then you hit these contradictions, big ones.
Yeah, this is where it gets really fascinating, right? Trump posts thanking Iran for giving early notice about their missile attack on Al Udeid.
Right, claiming that this early notice meant no lives were lost, made it sound like a prearranged, almost symbolic strike.
But Qatar's foreign ministry spokesperson comes out and says the attack was a surprise.
Exactly, a complete surprise. Those two statements just don't line up at all, do they?
Not even close. It screams narrative control, doesn't it? Both sides trying to frame what happened in the best possible light for them.
Absolutely. And it really highlights for you, listening to this, just how hard it is to get the ground truth in the middle of a crisis like this, with information flying around.
And the conflicting accounts didn't stop with the early notice thing either. What about damage and casualties?
Yeah, same story. Trump stated very clearly, no Americans were harmed and hardly any damage was done. He claimed, 13 out of 14 incoming missiles were shot down.
Okay, but what did Qatar say, since the base was on their soil?
Well, Qatar's Ministry of Interior had different numbers. They reported 11 out of 19 missiles were intercepted. And crucially, they mentioned some debris did fall in residential areas.
Ah, so not quite hardly any damage. Although they also confirmed no casualties, right, because of the evacuation.
Correct. No casualties reported, which is the most important thing. But even so, Qatar's foreign ministry didn't mince words. They still strongly condemned the attack, called it a violation of their sovereignty.
Even though no one was hurt.
Even so. Shows how seriously they took it.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, Iran made a point of clarifying their position towards Qatar.
How so?
Their Supreme National Security Council put out a statement basically saying, look, this was purely about the U.S. military base. We weren't targeting Qatar itself, our friendly and brotherly country.
Interesting. So trying to manage the diplomatic fallout with Qatar specifically.
Seems like it. They needed Qatar potentially for mediation, so they couldn't afford to alienate them.
Okay, so beyond the diplomacy and the conflicting narratives, what were the immediate, tangible impacts? We mentioned regional alerts, but what else?
Well, the big one for a lot of people probably was air travel. It just got massively disrupted.
Right, you had Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, all temporarily closing their airspace or air bases.
Yeah, and that had a huge knock-on effect. Think about all the major airlines that hub through or fly over that region. Emirates, Etihad, Qatar Airways, Turkish Airlines.
Air India Express, Indigo.
Exactly. All of them were suddenly rerouting flights, suspending services, warning passengers about massive delays or cancellations. Even Dubai Airport had to halt operations for a bit.
Just shows how a localized conflict can instantly snarl up global networks.
It really does. And then there were other security measures popping up. That report of a surface-to-air missile system seen near the White House.
Yeah, I saw that. And Bahrain sounding sirens because they detected unidentified objects. You
Yeah.
could feel the tension ratcheting up everywhere.
Definitely. And diplomatically, the condemnations continued alongside the ceasefire talk.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, the UAE, both strongly condemned Iran's attack on Qatar,
Yeah.
pledged support for Doha.
And Iran. What were their leaders saying publicly?
Well, Supreme Leader Khamenei took a firm line. Iran didn't start it, he said, but won't accept any aggression. And Iran's military chief apparently vowed to keep targeting Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Wow, even after the ceasefire announcement.
It seems so. Suggests those underlying tensions aren't just switched off, right? Iran also said, okay, we're open to diplomacy, but we'll retaliate again if U.S. and Israeli attacks don't stop completely.
So a ceasefire, but with caveats and continued rhetoric.
Pretty much. And meanwhile, on the ground in Tehran, you had a different reaction entirely.
The celebrations.
Yeah, reports of car rallies, people gathering in Valdezur Square, actually celebrating the missile strikes on the U.S. base.
That's quite a contrast. High level talks about ceasefires and street level celebrations of military action.
It really paints a picture of the different layers of this whole situation.
Right.
And it wasn't just high politics and military stuff. Daily life got hit, too.
Like the exams in Qatar being postponed.
Exactly. The Ministry of Education pushed back exams scheduled for June 24th, and you had embassies, like the Indian Embassy in Qatar, putting out advisories reassuring their citizens things were stable, but urging caution.
Shows how these big geopolitical events trickle all the way down.
Absolutely.
So wrapping this all up, I mean, this deep dive has really laid bare just how fast things can move. A super intense, multi-layered international crisis. Escalation, retaliation, then a declared ceasefire, all in a matter of days.
Yeah, involving multiple global players, the U.S., Iran, Israel, Qatar playing a key role. And, as we've spent a lot of time discussing, riddled with these conflicting narratives.
It really hammers home for you, listening, how quickly these geopolitical shockwaves can spread, right? Disrupting global travel, ratcheting up regional security fears almost overnight.
Definitely.
And maybe it leaves us with a final thought to chew on. You know, in this age we live in, with information flying at us instantly and all these competing claims, how do we, trying to be informed global citizens, actually evaluate these big declarations, like a declaration of peace or an ending to a conflict?
Especially when you know the underlying tensions are still there, simmering away, and the accounts of what actually happened are still being contested.
Exactly. What questions do these kinds of incredibly swift, dramatic events leave you pondering about, well, the future of how countries interact, particularly in that region? It's something to think about.